Hello, welcome to my second flip through. This time I'm going to be talking through what you're seeing here. Um, this sketchbook was used for a lot of different things, and when I started out, um, I was pretty disappointed. I had seen these sketchbooks for a long time, an orange lectern, and I love orange. I love that you can get a colored cover. It reminded me of lots of moleskin, so I thought I'd go for it. But unfortunately, as I pause, this is my favorite drawing right here, probably in this whole sketchbook. But unfortunately, the sketchbook's paper is super thin. As you can see, most of the time you can see through it. You can see the drawing that came after it or that came before it. And so that made me not be particularly thrilled with the sketchbook. However, what I did find was that the sketchbook writes pens of all kinds write beautifully on it, and some colored pencils as well. So once I figured that out, I decided this was going to be a pen only sketchbook. And for a while it had been dormant, but then I started using it regularly and I took it on my trip to New York City um, last year. And this right here is another one of my favorites in the sketchbook, and I want to reuse that drawing somehow for something more finished. And then here I'm using a pen that is called a CMYK pen where I can mix the colors. But the trouble still stands that you can see through and behind all the paper. So for that reason, I probably would not get this sketchbook again. Although for pen drawings, it really is absolutely great. It's very, very smooth, the pages. I just wish they would make thicker pages. That drawing right there that I pointed at was my son. It's one of my favorite drawings. I started adding things into the sketchbook too. Since the sketchbook was so thin, I figured I'd jazz it up a little by putting some fodder in and just continuing to make peace with it. Here I used it to test out some pens. I often draw sermons during church, one of those magic colored pencils. Every kind of pen pretty much works really, really well. Obviously, if you press pens harder, like I showed there, it kind of comes through the page. So I started to use a little paper they gave, and I made myself another little um, sort of backing um, to protect the pages that came later. Any kind of thicker ink or fountain pen almost bleeds through the back. So that was a real hindrance. This is some work I did for graduate school, so I drew elephant after elephant after elephant as part of some study and preparation for a big project I did for my final thesis project for my capstone. Um, as you can see, I'm even having a hard time turning the pages because the paper's so thin. Um, Overall, I'm really glad I finally finished the sketchbook because of my lack of desire to work in it. It probably took me about 2 years plus to fill it. Um, Once I got going on it and went for pen, it went quicker. It does have a lot of paper, so you will not go through it quickly. So if you're interested in just a sketchbook that's a good bang for the buck as far as pages, this would be good for that. As you can see, it can take a variety of pens and markers sometimes, but ultimately it's just really, really thin. I suppose if you're just writing in it or doing calligraphy, you might be okay with it, but I decided to just finish it in order not to be wasteful. Um, but yeah, the thinness of the paper really was a hindrance for me, and for that reason, I would probably not get it again. Um, I like this guy drawn from memory. And at the end of the sketchbook, I start working with some highlighters and some brighter pens, and that worked pretty well, and it did allow me to lay things over, which was nice. Um, but I definitely couldn't use back to back, um, and I definitely couldn't expect to do stuff that would last forever since the paper was so very thin. Overall, I'm glad that it is finished and I can move on to a different sketchbook. And if you have any questions, I'd love to hear from you. If you like any of my drawings, I'd like to hear from you. Give me a thumbs up. And I will be filming some other older sketchbooks because now that I know what I'm doing a little bit better, I can do that with more frequency and going forward. Um, a little memory of what we're living through, coronavirus, an idea of covering some mistake with a post-it, using letters to make drawings, inspired by TED Talks, um, drawing things that I don't typically draw, um, figuring out what every color looks like from my new line of watercolor markers, um, more experimentation, uh, drawing from photos, drawing a friend, um, trying out mechanical colored pencils, and trying out some tape art. So if you're willing to try out different things, you might discover something that I didn't, but colored pencils worked pretty well if you don't press too hard for drawing. Um, and pens, of course, glide on the smooth paper, but you'll have to deal with the fact that it comes through to the other side. Here I do a final sampling of some colored pencils and I finish out with a zoom call. All in all, that is my review and my flip through of this sketchbook.